Emily, a single mother-to-be, and a millionaire CEO were working late in the same office. Amidst midnight confessions, silence turned into love, and their lives changed forever. A touching story of connection and transformation that will move you. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment on where you are watching from. The March rain battered New York City with an almost theatrical intensity, as if the city itself was crying alongside Emily while she typed frantically on her well-worn Dell laptop, already showing signs of 2 years of heavy use at Apex Business Consulting. The computer clock read 11:47 p.m. when she finally paused to rub her tired eyes, feeling the weight of her 4-month pregnancy pressing against the ergonomic chair that had become her second home. The 30th floor of Skyline Tower, located in the heart of Fifth Avenue, offered a privileged view of the lights twinkling like earthly stars through the panoramic windows. Emily adjusted her navy blazer that was beginning to tighten around her belly, where a small life was growing without the presence of a father. At 28 years old, with a degree in business administration from NYU and a specialization in corporate finance, she had built her career with iron determination, especially after Ryan, the baby's father, had simply vanished from her life 3 weeks ago, leaving only a message on WhatsApp. "I'm not ready for this. I'm sorry." Coward, Emily muttered under her breath, allowing herself that moment of anger as she saved the quarterly report that had consumed her last 4 hours. Her fingers trembled slightly. She didn't know if it was from fatigue, pregnancy, or the anxiety that gnawed at her inside like acid. She needed to prove her worth to the company before maternity leave arrived. She needed to show that being a single mother wouldn't make her less competent, less dedicated, less valuable. The Apex office occupied 3 floors of the building, with modern decor in shades of grey and blue, clean-lined furniture, and those abstract paintings that tried to convey corporate seriousness. During the day, the environment buzzed with the voices of consultants, analysts, and assistants racing against impossible deadlines. But at that moment, only the sound of rain and the low hum of the air conditioning filled the sepulchral silence. Emily was about to shut down her computer when she heard something that made her freeze. Footsteps echoing down the marble corridor, male footsteps, firm, deliberate. Her heart raced. Who else would be there at that hour? The security guards only patrolled the lower floors, and the cleaning crew had finished by 10 p.m. Instinctively, she opened her desk drawer and touched the pepper spray she always carried, a remnant from her years living alone in Brooklyn. The footsteps grew closer, and Emily held her breath as a figure appeared in the entrance of the finance department. It was Ryan Anderson. The CEO of the company walked toward her, carrying a white Nespresso cup, his navy Hermes tie loosened and the top 2 buttons of his dress shirt undone. At 35, Ryan possessed that kind of natural elegance that came from birth. Impeccably styled dark brown hair, green eyes that seemed to see through people, and a posture that screamed leadership even when he was relaxed. Emily knew him only from afar, general meetings, occasional encounters in the elevator, that kind of hierarchical distance that separated CEOs from analysts like a social chasm. "I thought I was the last one here," he said, stopping in front of her desk. His voice was deep, with a slight aristocratic New York accent that revealed his elite upbringing. But there was something different about that smile. A vulnerability that Emily had never seen in corporate presentations or in Forbes magazine photos. "I was finishing the quarterly reports," Emily stammered, feeling exposed under his penetrating gaze. Automatically, she pulled her blazer to try to disguise the belly that was beginning to show. "I didn't know you were still in the building." Ryan chuckled softly, a genuine sound that contrasted with the seriousness she associated with him. "Stop with the sir, for God's sake. After 11 p.m. corporate hierarchy should be suspended, don't you think?" He pulled up a chair and sat down next to her, completely ignoring the unwritten rules about personal space between boss and subordinate. "And you? What is a financial analyst doing here at this hour on a rainy Tuesday?" The question was simple, but something in the way he asked it, without judgment, just genuine curiosity, made Emily feel an inexplicable urge to be honest. "I need to prove that I'm worth it," she said, surprising herself with her own transparency. That my personal situation won't affect my professional performance." Ryan's green eyes fixed on her face for a long moment. "Personal situation?" Emily instinctively touched her belly, the gesture speaking for itself. "I'm 4 months pregnant, and, well, I'm going to raise this baby alone." She expected to see discomfort, that look of pity she hated so much, or worse, the cold calculation of a CEO assessing whether a pregnant employee would be a problem. Instead, she saw something completely unexpected: understanding. "You know," Ryan said, swirling the coffee cup between his hands, "when I was 7, my mother raised me and my brother alone for 2 years. My father had gotten involved with the secretary and abandoned the family to start over in Miami." He made air quotes with a bitter expression. "Those were the 2 hardest years of our childhood, but also the most real. She showed us that true strength has nothing to do with last names or bank accounts." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't expected that kind of confession from the man who, to her, represented the pinnacle of male corporate success. "And what happened next?" she asked, genuinely curious. "My father came back when he realized the secretary was more interested in his money than in him. Ryan's mother accepted him back, but it was never the same. She had discovered that she was stronger than she imagined." Ryan took a sip of the coffee and grimaced. "This coffee is terrible. Want some tea? I have a ridiculously expensive collection of imported teas in my office." Emily hesitated. Accepting would mean prolonging that surreal conversation, breaking down the professional barriers she should maintain even further. But there was something about his presence that calmed the constant anxiety she had been carrying for weeks. "All right," she said, "but only if you tell me why you're here at this hour too." Ryan stood up and extended his hand to help her. When Emily accepted, she felt calluses in his palms, not the soft hands of someone who only signs papers, but of someone who knew physical work. "Gentleman's agreement," he said, with that smile that completely transformed his face. "You share your battles, I share mine. And maybe we'll find out that we're not so different after all, despite the flaws that separate us." As they walked together down the silent corridor toward the presidential office, Emily couldn't imagine that this late-night conversation would change not only her perception of Ryan Anderson, but also the course of her own life. Outside, the rain continued to fall over New York, washing the streets of the city that never sleeps, setting the stage for a story that was just beginning. The presidential office of Apex was a universe apart from the rest of the company. Located on the 32nd floor, it occupied an area equivalent to a high-end apartment, with hardwood floors, a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf filled with business books and classic literature, and a discreet bar in the right corner where Ryan kept his collection of imported teas. The presidential desk, an imposing piece of mahogany, was covered with papers, charts, and 3 monitors displaying real-time stock quotes, even at that hour of the morning. "Earl Grey or chamomile?" Ryan asked, turning on a discreet electric kettle hidden behind a small refrigerator. Emily watched, fascinated, as he moved through the space naturally, away from corporate gazes, revealing an intimacy with that environment that went far beyond the professional. "Earl Grey sounds good," she replied, sinking into the Italian leather armchair in front of the desk. For the first time, in weeks, she felt the muscles in her back relax. Wow, the view from up here is stunning. The panoramic windows offered a 360-degree perspective of New York. Even with the rain, the city lights created a shimmering carpet that stretched to the horizon, dotted with the illuminated buildings of Wall Street and the red lights of cars still cutting through the avenues. "It's the view my father chose when he bought this floor in 1987, Ryan said, handing a delicate porcelain cup to Emily. He used to say that a leader needed to see far to make the right decisions. The irony in his voice was palpable. Too bad he couldn't see his own problems right in front of his nose. Emily took a sip of the tea, savouring the perfect blend of bergamot that contrasted with the watery instant coffee she drank at the office. Problems? Ryan threw himself into the presidential chair, which creaked slightly under his weight. For a moment, he seemed much younger than his 35 years, like a boy lost in an office too big for him. My father built this company from scratch. He started as an accountant who graduated from NYU serving small businesses in Chinatown in the 70s. When I was a child, he worked 16 hours a day, including Saturdays and Sundays. My mother always complained that he loved the company more than the family. And did he love? Emily asked, surprised by her own courage to ask such an intimate question. Maybe, Ryan admitted, spinning a crystal paperweight between his fingers. Or maybe he just didn't know how to show love in any other way. For men of his generation, especially those who came from poor families, providing financially was the only form of affection they knew. Emily nodded, thinking of her own father, who had died of a heart attack at 52 while working 2 jobs to support the family. And how did you become CEO? Was it a natural transition? Ryan's bitter laugh echoed through the office. Natural. My father threw me into the presidency 3 years ago, like someone throwing someone into the deep end of the pool to see if they can swim. I was happy as CFO, taking care of the numbers, keeping my distance from political decisions. But then he had his first heart attack and decided he needed a successor immediately. First heart attack? Emily noted the choice of words. The second happened 6 months after I took over the presidency. This time, it was more serious. The doctors were clear. Either he retired completely, or he wouldn't make it to 70. Ryan paused, fixing his gaze on the city lights. Do you know what the first thing he said to me when he woke up in the ICU of Mount Sinai? Emily shook her head, hypnotized by the raw vulnerability in his voice. Don't disappoint the clients. Not, how are you? Not, thank you for being here. Just the worry about the damn company. Ryan's voice carried years of unresolved bitterness. And the worst part is that I understood, because now I'm just like him. This company has become my life too. Emily observed his face under the soft light of the desk lamp. Ryan had deep, dark circles, like someone who hadn't slept well in a long time, and a tension in his jaw that suggested chronic stress. Why are you here at this hour? She asked softly. Ryan pointed to a stack of documents on the desk. Merger proposal with Thompson Consulting. They want to buy Apex for $80 million, which would be an excellent deal for my father and me. The problem is that they intend to optimize the operation, which in the corporate world means laying off 40% of the employees. Emily felt a chill. And are you considering it? This is the question. Financially, it makes perfect sense. Thompson has international contracts, a larger structure, more efficient processes. We could triple profits in 2 years. Ryan picked a sheet from the stack and extended it to Emily. But look at this list. Emily examined the document. It was a list of names with positions and salaries. Employees who would be laid off in the merger. She recognized several. Maria from accounting, a single mother of 2. John from HR, who supported his sick wife. Carla from reception, who was paying for night classes. 43 people, said Ryan. 43 families that depend on the salaries here, and I have until Friday to decide whether to destroy their lives in the name of corporate efficiency. Emily then understood why he was there at that hour, drinking cold coffee and reviewing documents. It wasn't ambition or workaholism. It was the weight of a decision that would define the kind of leader he chose to be. "And what is your heart telling you?" she asked. "My heart?" Ryan laughed, but without humor. "Emily, I've been trained to ignore my heart since I stepped into this office. My father always said, 'Feelings don't pay the bills. Rational decisions build empires.' But you're not your father." The simplicity of the statement hit Ryan like a punch. He fell silent for a long moment, studying her face. Emily had delicate features, light brown hair tied in a bun that was starting to come undone after long hours of work, and brown eyes that sparkled with sharp intelligence. But what impressed him most was the absence of judgment in her expression. She listened to him as an equal, not as a subordinate trying to impress the boss. "You know," he finally said, "when I was a kid, my dream was to be a veterinarian. I wanted to care for abandoned animals, have a clinic in the countryside, a simple life away from spreadsheets and board meetings." And what happened to that dream? Reality. Responsibilities. The realization that childhood dreams are luxuries that adult men cannot afford. Ryan sighed deeply. Especially when you inherit a legacy that employs 200 people and supports their families. Emily felt a pang of empathy so intense that it surprised her. Here was a man who, from the outside, had everything: money, power, success, but who carried an invisible weight that she recognized intimately. The pressure to be strong when you just want to hide, to make decisions when you don't even know if you believe in them. "Can I ask an indiscreet question?" she said. "After everything I've already shared, you can ask anything. Why are you being so open with me? I'm just an analyst. You don't even know me well." Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Do you know what it's like to spend 3 years having conversations only about numbers, results, and strategies? Everyone who talks to me wants something: approval, promotion, a raise. You're the first person in a long time who looks at me and sees a person, not a position." The rain outside had diminished, turning into a fine drizzle that blurred the windows. Emily glanced at the clock on the wall. 1:15 a.m. She should be home, sleeping, taking care of her pregnancy. Instead, she was having the most honest conversation she'd had in months. "Ryan," she said, testing his name for the first time. "Can I give you unsolicited advice?" He nodded. "Maybe the question isn't whether you will disappoint your father or the investors. Maybe it is: what kind of man do you want your future child to see when they look at you?" The question hit Ryan hard. He fell silent, processing her words while observing the slightly rounded belly beneath her blazer. "And you?" he asked softly. "What kind of mother do you want to be?" It was Emily's turn to feel the impact of the question. "One who isn't afraid," she answered without hesitation. "One who teaches my child that being strong doesn't mean not being afraid, but doing the right thing even when you're terrified." Ryan smiled, the first genuine smile of the night. "I think your child will be lucky." As they finished their tea in a comfortable silence, both understood that something fundamental had changed between them. The rain had completely stopped, and the first lights of dawn began to tint the New York skyline with a soft pink. It was the beginning of a connection neither had planned, but both would find to be exactly what they needed at that moment in their lives. The aroma of fresh coffee and pastries filled the presidential office at 6:30 a.m. when Ryan returned, carrying a bag from the gourmet cafe in the building's lobby. Emily had dozed off in the leather armchair, wrapped in his suit that smelled of a sophisticated mix of Armani perfume and masculine fatigue. She woke to the sound of the door and felt a pang of embarrassment as she realized where she was. "I thought you had left," she said, fixing her hair and returning the jacket. The morning light revealed that Ryan had shaved and changed his shirt. He must have an emergency kit somewhere in the office. And leave a pregnant woman here alone? What kind of gentleman do you think I am? Ryan spread the items across the table: warm croissants, berries, Greek yogurt, and a special decaffeinated coffee. I remembered that pregnant women can't have caffeine, or rather they can have little. My sister-in-law complained about that throughout her pregnancy. Emily felt her stomach growl loudly enough for both to hear. Oh, how embarrassing. I haven't had coffee properly in weeks. Lately I've been feeling nauseous in the mornings, and you don't need to explain, Ryan interrupted, pushing a bowl of fruit in her direction. My sister-in-law vomited so much in the first months that my younger brother lost weight from worry. It was the first mention of Ryan's close family, and Emily seized the opportunity. Do you have siblings? Ryan's face. The conversation closed slightly, like someone touching a poorly healed wound. He did. Michael died 5 years ago in a motorcycle accident on the West Side Highway. He was only 28 years old. Oh my God, Ryan, I'm so sorry. He was my younger brother, completely different from me. He was the rebel of the family, studying at film school, dreaming of directing independent films. My dad never understood his artistic fantasies. Ryan cut a croissant into small pieces, seemingly distracted. The night of the accident, we had fought. He wanted me to help him get a loan to produce a documentary about homeless people. I told him it was a waste of time, that he needed to grow up and think about a serious career. Emily watched his hands tremble slightly as he stirred his coffee. Was that the last conversation you had? He stormed out of the house, shouting that I had become a pathetic copy of our father, that I had sold my soul to a company that wasn't even mine. 3 hours later, the police knocked on our door. Ryan paused, looking out the window. You know what the cruelest part was? He was coming home. He had called our mum to apologize for the fight, saying he wanted to talk to me again. The rain was heavy. He lost control of the motorcycle on the turn. The silence that followed was thick, laden with pain and regret. Emily instinctively reached out and touched Ryan's wrist, a simple gesture that he seemed to feel deeply. Is that why you stay so late at the office? She asked softly. Because of the guilt. Ryan looked directly at her, surprised by her perception. Maybe, or maybe I'm afraid to go home and face the silence. Michael lived in the apartment next door. Every night I heard him watching movies until late, always with the volume a little too loud. It was annoying, but now the silence is worse. Emily then understood a deeper layer of Ryan's complexity. He was not just a CEO dealing with corporate pressures, but a man carrying the weight of unspoken words and missed opportunities for connection. Can I tell you something about myself? She said, biting into a strawberry. Something I've never told anyone at the company? Ryan nodded, grateful for the shift in focus. I didn't plan this pregnancy. In fact, I was taking birth control religiously, but I had a severe intestinal infection in January, took antibiotics, and, well, no one warned me about the drug interaction. Emily laughed bitterly. When I found out I was pregnant, my first reaction was to panic, not just because of the situation with Daniel, but because I had just been promoted to senior analyst. I had planned the next 5 years of my career. And now I wake up every day wondering if I can be a good mother and a competent professional at the same time. If I can provide stability for this child without sacrificing everything I've built so far. Emily unconsciously touched her belly. Daniel always said that women who prioritized their careers were cold, selfish. Maybe he was right. About me. That's bullshit, Ryan said with a vehemence that surprised her. Sorry for the language, but that's exactly it. You're here at 2 in the morning finishing reports to prove your worth, worried about giving the best for your child. How is that selfish? But what if I can't? What if I'm too much of a mother to be a professional, or too much of a professional to be a mother? Ryan leaned forward, speaking with an intensity that made Emily pay complete attention. Emily, can I tell you about someone I met? A woman who raised 2 children, practically alone, worked as an accountant at 3 different jobs to pay for our education, and still never missed a parent-teacher meeting or failed to make the Sunday dinner that brought our family together. Your mother, Emily said, understanding. My mother. And you know what she always said? That being a mother wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. And you, Emily, you are present. You're here fighting for a better future for you and your baby. That's not selfish. It's love in action. Emily felt her eyes welling up, a mix of pregnancy hormones and emotional relief. It was the first time in weeks that someone made her feel that maybe, just maybe, she could handle it all. Ryan's phone buzzed, breaking the intimacy of the moment. It was a message from the board. The merger meeting had been moved up to 9 a.m. that morning. Damn, he murmured, checking the time. I have 2 hours to decide the future of 43 families. Emily watched the tension return to his face. Impulsively, she made a decision that surprised her. Ryan, can I see the numbers from the merger proposal? The real financial data, not just the executive summary. He looked at her in surprise. Why? Because I'm a financial analyst. It's what I do. Find alternatives that executives don't see because they're too close to the problem. Emily straightened in her chair, assuming the professional posture she knew well. And because maybe you need someone to look at those numbers without the emotional pressure of having to make the final decision. Ryan hesitated for just a moment before heading to the discreet safe behind his desk. This is highly confidential. If anyone finds out you had access, no one will know, Emily assured him. You have my word. He returned with a sealed folder containing the complete documents of the Thompson proposal. Emily opened them with the precision of someone who knew exactly what to look for, her eyes scanning columns of numbers, cash flow projections, and market analyses. After 40 minutes of concentrated silence, she looked up with an expression that Ryan couldn't decipher. Ryan, she said slowly, I need to ask you a very important question. Do you trust me? After tonight? Completely. Emily. She took a deep breath. So I need to tell you something that will completely change how you see this proposal, something that Thompson doesn't want you to know. Her tone made Ryan feel a chill in his stomach. What did you find? Emily turned one of the documents in his direction, pointing to a series of numbers at the bottom of the page. They don't just want to buy Brightech, Ryan. They want to destroy the competition. Look at these contracts they refer to as future opportunities. They are exactly the clients you lost in the last 6 months. The puzzle began to form in Ryan's mind. Thompson wasn't making a generous offer. It was executing a calculated plan to eliminate an annoying competitor. And Emily had discovered the truth that would change everything. The presidential office had transformed into an improvised operations room. Emily had spread documents all over the mahogany table, creating a visual map of the connections she had uncovered between Thompson Consulting and Brightech's former clients. Ryan paced nervously between the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a cup of coffee that was cooling in his hands as he processed the implications of what she had revealed. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to a spreadsheet she had created on her laptop. "In the last 8 months, you lost 7 major contracts, all to Thompson, with bids coming in exactly 15% lower than the amounts you presented." Ryan stopped pacing. 15% is very specific, and too risky to be a coincidence. Exactly. No one can maintain a healthy profit margin by systematically cutting 15% off the price, unless... Emily paused dramatically. Unless they knew exactly how much you were going to charge before making their own bids. Are you suggesting we have an internal spy? Ryan's voice carried a mix of anger and disbelief. Emily opened another file on her computer. I'm not suggesting, I'm proving. On the screen appeared a list of corporate emails with timestamps and recipients. I hacked the internal audit system. Sorry, I know I shouldn't have, but I needed to be sure. Look at these accesses to the proposal files. Ryan leaned closer to the screen, his eyes scanning the data. Each accessed proposal corresponded exactly to the contracts they had lost, and all accesses had the same digital signature, sjohnsonbrighttech.com. Sarah Johnson, Ryan murmured, feeling the world collapse around him. Our sales director for 12 years, the woman my father trusted most in the company. There's more, Emily said, her voice heavy with pity for what she was about to reveal. The payments. Thompson isn't just buying information. They are paying for it through a shell consulting firm registered in the name of Sarah's husband. Ryan sank into the presidential chair, the weight of betrayal hitting him like a punch to the stomach. Sarah had been like a second mother to him during his adolescence, always present at family dinners, his parents' wedding godmother. The idea that she could betray them was unthinkable. Why would she do this, he asked, more to himself than to Emily. Severe financial problems, Emily replied, consulting other notes. I cross-referenced the data with some public information. Her husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer 2 years ago. The company's health insurance plan covers the basics, but the experimental treatments he's undergoing cost about $40,000 a month. The explanation didn't lessen the betrayal, but it humanized it in a way Ryan hadn't expected. And now, the meeting is in an hour. If I present this evidence, Sarah will be arrested. If I don't present it, I'm signing my own business death warrant. Emily saved the files and closed the laptop. Ryan, can I suggest a third option? I'm listening. What if you turned the tables? Use what we know to publicly expose Thompson, but in a way that also offers a way out for Sarah. Emily stood up and walked to the window, watching the top executives arriving at the building below. They are expecting you to accept the proposal, like a lamb going to slaughter. Let's show them they underestimated you. Ryan felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. Go on. Will Thompson be present at the meeting? Richard Thompson himself, along with 2 partners. Emily smiled, a smile that Ryan quickly learned to associate with trouble for her enemies. Perfect, you will accept their proposal. What? Emily, have you lost your mind? You will accept conditionally, she continued, ignoring his interruption. With a small twist, you want them to prove their competence by first taking on the 7 contracts you lost in the last few months. If they can keep all of them profitable for 6 months, then you can discuss a merger. Ryan began to understand her strategy. This would force them to admit they already have those contracts or back off from the proposal. Exactly. And in the meantime, you reorganize Brighttech internally, fix the leaks, and show the market that you are still a viable independent company. Emily returned to his side. But there's one condition. You need to talk to Sarah before the meeting. To fire her? To offer her an alternative. Ryan, she isn't a criminal by nature. She's a desperate person who made wrong decisions. If you fire her, she goes to jail, and her husband dies without treatment. If you work with her, you can turn her into your greatest ally. Ryan studied Emily's face, impressed by the strategic complexity behind the suggestion. What kind of alternative? The company covers her husband's treatment through a better health insurance plan, and in exchange, she becomes a double agent. She continues passing information to Thompson, but information that you want them to have. False data, inflated proposals, fictitious strategies. That's brilliant, Ryan said slowly, and completely crazy. The best strategies always are, Emily smiled. My specialization at Harvard Business School was in corporate crisis management. I learned that sometimes you can't avoid war, but choose your battlefield. Ryan stood up and began to walk again, but this time with renewed energy. I need to call HR. Prepare the documentation for the new health insurance plan. Structure the conversation with Sarah. He paused. Emily, do you realize that you just saved not only my company but probably my entire career? Not yet, she said, checking the time on her phone. First, you need to execute the plan. And there's one more thing you need to do. What? Emily opened her bag and took out a small digital recorder. During the meeting, you'll use this. If Thompson reacts as we expect, trying to explain themselves or deny the contracts, you'll have evidence of irregular business practices. This could be useful in the future. Ryan took the device, the size of a coin, and examined it. Where did you get this? My ex-boyfriend, Daniel, was an investigative journalist before he decided he wanted to live without responsibilities. At least one useful thing came out of that relationship. The mention of her ex brought a shadow to her face. Ryan, can I ask you a favor? After everything you did this morning, anything. Emily hesitated, showing vulnerability for the first time since she started analyzing the documents. If this goes wrong, if somehow they find out I helped with the strategy, can you promise me you'll protect my job, at least until the baby is born? Ryan stepped closer to her, placing his hands on her shoulders with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of the morning. Emily, you don't understand. After today, regardless of what happens, you won't just be any analyst in this company. You just proved that you have an exceptional strategic mind. What do you mean? I mean that when this is all over, we'll talk about your career. Maybe it's time for Brightech to have a director of strategic planning. Ryan smiled. If you're interested, of course. Emily felt her heart race, not only because of the professional proposal, but because of the way Ryan was looking at her. There was something in his green eyes that went far beyond professional gratitude. First, let's survive the next 2 hours, she said, trying to stay focused. Then we can talk about the future. The desk phone rang, breaking the moment. It was Ryan's secretary informing him that the representatives from Thompson had arrived and were being directed to the executive meeting room. It's time, Ryan said, adjusting his tie and putting on his blazer. For a moment he reverted to the confident CEO that Emily had only known from a distance. Ryan, she said as he was almost at the door, good luck. He turned, and for the first time since they met, Emily saw something in his eyes that made her tremble slightly. Emily, he said, no matter what happens today, I want you to know that this has been the most important night of my life, not just professionally. Before she could respond, he left, leaving her alone in the presidential office with a feeling that everything was about to change, not just for the company, but for both of them. Down below, the city of New York buzzed with morning traffic, unaware that on the 32nd floor of Skyline Tower, a silent battle was about to decide the fate of hundreds of people, and Emily, looking through the panoramic windows, realized that for the first time in months she felt true hope about the future. The executive meeting room at Brightech was designed to intimidate. An oval-tempered glass table for 12, state-of-the-art video conferencing system, and a privileged view of Fifth Avenue, serving as a reminder of the corporate power at stake. Ryan entered at 8:55, finding Richard Thompson already seated at the opposite end of the table, flanked by two partners he didn't recognize, a graying man with glasses and a stern-looking woman holding a tablet. Ryan, Thompson said, standing up to greet him. Tall, tanned, with perfectly styled platinum hair, he exuded the kind of confidence that came from decades of winning corporate battles. I hope you had time to properly consider our proposal. I did, Ryan replied, shaking his hand with calculated firmness. In fact, it was a very enlightening night. The recorder was activated in the inner pocket of his blazer. Ryan took his position at the head of the table, noticing that Sarah still hadn't arrived, which was strange, considering she was never late for important meetings. Before we begin, Ryan said, I'd like to clarify a few points about our current operation. I think you may have outdated information regarding our performance. The stern-looking woman consulted her tablet. Our data shows that Brightech lost 7 significant contracts in the last 8 months. That represents approximately 35% of the base revenue. I don't see how this can be interpreted as positive performance. Ryan smiled internally. She had bitten the bait exactly as Emily had predicted. Interesting that you have such specific data about our contracts. Can you tell me exactly who those 7 clients were? Thompson exchanged a quick glance with his partners. Well, that's public market information, isn't it? Bids, announcements in specialized newspapers. Of course, Ryan agreed, pulling a folder from his briefcase. Coincidentally, I brought the exact details of those contracts. Perhaps we can compare them with the information you have. The graying man leaned forward. Ryan, we don't need to get into operational details. Our proposal is based on the future potential of the merger, not past problems. Oh, but I insist, Ryan said, spreading documents across the table, especially since I have a counter-proposal that might interest you very much. At that moment, Sarah entered the room, visibly nervous. At 54, she had always been an elegant and composed woman, but today her hands trembled slightly as she greeted those present. Ryan noticed that she avoided making direct eye contact with him. Sarah, Ryan said warmly, I'm glad you made it. I was just explaining to the folks at Thompson our new strategy for the next months. Emily sat down, clearly confused. New strategy. Yes, continued Ryan, directing his attention back to Thompson. Summer, after carefully analyzing your proposal, I've come to the conclusion that it makes sense, but with a slight modification. Thompson straightened in his chair. What kind of modification? Well, if you want to acquire Brightech for our client base and know-how, it makes sense that you first prove you can manage our former contracts better than we do, right? Ryan consulted his notes with calculated calm. I'm proposing that you take over the management of the 7 contracts that you won from us in the last few months. If you keep them all profitable for 6 months, then we can talk about a merger. The silence in the room was deafening. The woman with the tablet had stopped typing, and the grey-haired man adjusted his glasses nervously. That's a bit unorthodox, Thompson finally said. Our existing contracts are not part of this negotiation. But they're not existing contracts, Ryan smiled. They're contracts that you specifically won from Brightech. Therefore, they are directly relevant to our discussion. Emily was visibly paling. Ryan, perhaps we should discuss this internally first. No, Emily. I think now is the perfect time. Ryan turned to her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Actually, could you tell us about those contracts, since you were the one who managed most of their business proposals? The trap was closing. Emily looked desperately at Thompson, who maintained a neutral expression, but whose knuckles were white with tension. Well, we lost the bids because they submitted more competitive proposals, Emily stammered. Competitive how? Ryan asked with false innocence. Can you give us a specific example? Thompson quickly intervened. Ryan, I think we're losing focus. Our proposal is about the future, not about commercial revenge. Revenge? Ryan genuinely laughed. Robert, I'm just trying to understand the competence of the team that wants to take over our company. After all, if you systematically manage to win our proposals, you must have an exceptional methodology. The woman with the tablet finally spoke. Mr. Anderson, our methodology is proprietary. We cannot disclose details for commercial confidentiality reasons. Ryan nodded understandingly. Of course, I completely understand. But then you'll understand that I need assurances that I'm not selling my company to someone who gained an advantage through, let's say, privileged information. The accusation hung in the air like a grenade about to explode. Thompson stood up abruptly. "I'm starting to think that you have no real interest in our proposal," he said, the mask of cordiality finally slipping. "Perhaps we are wasting time here." "On the contrary," Ryan said, also standing up, "I'm very interested, so much so that I've prepared an alternative proposal." He opened another document. "Brightech is willing to pay $120 million to acquire Thomson Brazil." The shock was visible on the faces of the three representatives. "That's ridiculous," said the grey-haired man. "You don't have the capital for that." "Actually, we do," Ryan smiled, "especially considering we just cancelled an optimization program that will save approximately $60 million in severance costs, and we secured an investor interested in our innovative people management practices." It was a complete lie, but it sounded convincing. "What investor?" Thomson asked suspiciously. "That's proprietary information," Ryan replied, using their own words, "for confidentiality reasons." Emily was clearly in a panic. "Ryan, we need to talk privately." "Sure, Emily. In fact, I think this meeting has come to an end." Ryan turned to the Thomson representatives. "I'll give you 48 hours to consider our proposal. Either you accept our buyout offer or you completely withdraw your original proposal." Thomson was visibly irritated. "You can't give us ultimatums." "I can, and I am," Ryan replied calmly, "especially considering I have evidence of questionable business practices that could interest the FTC and the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The bluff worked. Thomson and the partners exchanged alarmed glances. "We'll reconsider our position," Thomson said quickly, gathering his documents. "We'll be in touch." After the Thomson representatives left, Ryan turned to Emily, who was clearly on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Emily," he said gently, "we need to talk, but first I want you to know that I found a solution for your husband's treatment." She broke down in tears, and Ryan knew that Emily had anticipated every move that morning with surgical precision. The first battle was won. But the war was just beginning. Emily Johnson's office was on the 28th floor, 3 floors below the presidency, but at that moment it felt like an ocean of distance from corporate power. The room was a reflection of her personality, meticulously organized, with family photos scattered across the desk, well-tended plants in the windows, and a small coffee maker always ready for clients. Now, however, Emily was sitting behind her mahogany desk, silently sobbing while Ryan occupied the armchair across from her. "How much longer does he have?" Ryan asked softly, pushing a box of tissues toward her. Emily wiped her eyes, leaving smudges of mascara on her cheeks. "The doctors said 6 months without the experimental treatment. With the treatment—" She paused, trying to control her voice. "Maybe 2 years, maybe more." "And have you spent all your savings?" "We sold the beach house in Cape Cod, his car, even. My mother's jewelry. $40,000 a month, Ryan. It's more than my net salary." Emily leaned forward, her hands trembling. "When Robert first approached me, I said no. I swear to God I said no." Ryan leaned back in the armchair, studying the face of the woman he had known since childhood. Emily had been promoted to commercial director when he was still in college, one of the few female executives in leadership positions at the company in the 90s. She had always been upright, dedicated, almost maternal with the younger employees. "What changed?" he asked without judgment in his voice. "David had a seizure at home. It was the middle of the night. I was desperate, calling doctors, trying to get a private ambulance because I didn't want to wait for Medicaid." Emily took a deep breath. "When we arrived at the hospital, and the doctor went straight to the point. Without treatment, he wouldn't make it to Christmas. It was September." Ryan felt a tightness in his chest. He had known David Johnson forever. A quiet man, a retired history teacher who loved to tell bad jokes at company barbecues. "Was that when you accepted the offer? From Thomson?" He said it was nothing serious, just some information about business proposals, project timelines. He said it was common practice in the industry, that all companies did it. Sarah laughed bitterly, as if that justified anything. And did it work? The treatment. David has been in remission for 3 months. The doctors are optimistic, but he needs to continue the medication for at least another 1.5 years. She looked directly at Ryan for the first time. I know I have no excuse. I know I betrayed your trust, your father's trust, everyone here. But I would do it again, 1,000 times. The brutal honesty of her statement hit Ryan unexpectedly. For a moment, he saw not the sales director who had sold the company, but a desperate wife who would do anything to save the man she loved. Sarah, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest. How much information did you pass on to them? And about what? Sarah opened the drawer of her desk and pulled out a USB drive. Everything is here. Copies of all the emails I sent, all the documents I shared, all the meetings I had with them. I prepared this 2 weeks ago when I started to suspect they had bigger plans than just healthy competition. Ryan took the USB drive, impressed. Why did you do this? Because I found out it wasn't just about winning some contracts. They wanted information about our internal structure, our processes, our key employees. They started asking about your leadership, about possible vulnerabilities in management. Sarah straightened in her chair. That's when I realized I was helping to destroy a company I helped build. And then I started documenting everything. And I began passing false information whenever I could. A weak smile appeared on her face. Do you think that inflated proposal for Chevron that we lost last month was a coincidence? I told them our margin was 30% higher than it actually was. Ryan almost smiled. Even while betraying the company, Sarah was still trying to protect it. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Their merger proposal is not a real proposal. It's a disguised hostile acquisition strategy. They want to buy us to shut down our operation and take our client base. Sarah didn't seem surprised. I figured. In the last meetings, they stopped asking about optimization and started asking about office lease contracts, labor agreements, things you only ask if you're planning to dismantle everything. And you didn't warn me why? Because I was afraid you'd find out about the payments and fire me on the spot. David still needs treatment for another 17 months. Sarah paused. And because I didn't know how to tell you that I had betrayed the only person who ever trusted me. The silence that followed was thick, laden with complex emotions. Ryan thought of Emily's words about desperate people making wrong decisions, about the difference between villains and victims of circumstance. Sarah, I'm going to make you a proposal, he finally said, but I need you to answer one question first. Do you trust me? After everything I've done, why would you trust me? Because you just handed me evidence of your own crime without me asking, because you tried to protect the company even while betraying it, and because I know you well enough to see that this situation is destroying you inside. Ryan leaned forward. The question is, do you still want to be part of the solution? Sarah looked at him with a mix of hope and disbelief. What do you have in mind? First, the company will fully cover David's treatment. We will hire a premium health insurance plan that covers all costs, retroactive to the last 6 months. Ryan, I can't accept this after what... Second, he continued, ignoring the interruption, you will continue to be our sales director, but with an additional role, you will keep passing information to Thompson. Sarah went pale. You want me to keep betraying the company? I want you to pass exactly the information that I want them to have. False data, fictitious strategies, inflated numbers. You will become our secret weapon against them. The idea was audacious and risky, but Ryan could see that it made sense. Sarah knew Thompson's tactics. She understood how they operated, what kind of information they were looking for. And what if they find out? They won't find out because you'll be very good at it, and because we'll provide information that is plausible enough to maintain credibility. Ryan stood up. Sarah, I need an answer now. Are you with me or not? Sarah stood up too, extending her hand to him. I'm with you, and, Ryan, thank you. They shook hands, sealing an agreement that would turn the biggest betrayal in the company's history into its greatest strategic advantage. Now, Ryan said, I need to introduce you to someone who masterminded this entire strategy, someone who will work directly with you in the coming months. Who? Ryan smiled, thinking of Emily waiting in his office. Someone who understands that sometimes the best people are those who have made mistakes and learned from them. As they ascended together to the 32nd floor, Ryan reflected on how that morning had completely changed his perspective on leadership. It wasn't about punishing mistakes, but about turning weaknesses into strengths, and about how sometimes the best alliances were born from the most unlikely circumstances. When the elevator doors opened, Emily was waiting in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee and a smile that indicated she already knew the first step of the plan had succeeded. The silent revolution of Brightech was officially underway. 3 weeks had passed since the meeting with Thompson, and the 32nd floor of Apex had become the epicenter of a silent but radical transformation. Emily had set up what she jokingly called the War Room, in one of the smaller meeting rooms, where relationship maps, action timelines, and performance graphs covered the glass walls like a constantly evolving corporate puzzle. It was a warm April afternoon, typical of New York's spring, when Ryan entered the room to find Emily and Sarah huddled over spreadsheets on the laptop, their voices mixing business strategy with speculations about Emily's pregnancy. Has the morning sickness improved? Sarah asked, offering a glass of water with lemon drops to Emily. Much, thank you. I think as I move into the 5th month, things are stabilizing. Emily unconsciously touched her belly, which was now starting to show even under the looser blouses, although the doctor said, I need to slow down at work. About that, Ryan interrupted, entering the conversation with an expression that mixed concern and determination. We need to talk, Emily. Sarah immediately stood up. I'll get more coffee. You two need privacy. Once they were alone, Ryan pulled out a chair and sat across from Emily, noticing the dark circles under her eyes that had deepened in recent weeks. Did the doctor say anything specific? Nothing serious, Emily replied quickly. Just that I'm working too many hours and need more rest, a bit of high blood pressure, nothing that can't be resolved with more sleep and less caffeine. Emily, you've been working 14 hours a day for 3 weeks. That's not sustainable, especially while pregnant. Ryan, we're in the middle of a complex operation. Thompson hasn't given a final response on our counter-proposal. Sarah is mastering the art of passing false information, and we're restructuring our entire business strategy. Emily gestured towards the walls covered in documents. I can't stop now. You can, and you will, Ryan said with a firmness that surprised her. Starting tomorrow, you will work. A maximum of 8 hours a day with a mandatory lunch break, and no work on weekends. Emily laughed, but without humor. Ryan, you can't give me orders about my workload. Technically, I'm still a full analyst, not your direct subordinate. Actually, Ryan said, pulling a document from his folder, we also need to talk about this. Emily took the paper, and her eyes widened at the header. Employment contract. Director of Strategic Planning. The salary listed was almost 3 times what she earned as an analyst. Ryan, I can't accept this. Why not? Because it will look like you're promoting me for for reasons other than professional ones. Emily placed the contract on the table. People will talk. Ryan leaned forward, his green eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. Emily, you saved this company. You developed a strategy that turned our biggest weakness into our greatest strength. You have a business vision that took me years to develop. This promotion is not a favor. It's recognition. But the timing. The timing is perfect. We need someone with your analytical skills in a position of real influence. And frankly, Ryan paused, I need someone I trust completely working directly with me. The word trust hung between them, laden with multiple meanings. Emily knew Ryan wasn't just talking about professional competence. What if Thompson discovers that the person who devised the strategy against them is the new director of the company? Let them find out, Ryan replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. In fact, I want them to know exactly who they are dealing with. At that moment, Sarah returned with a tray containing coffee, water, and some whole-grain cookies. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you might need a snack. And Emily, I brought these sugar-free cookies. They're better for pregnancy. Sarah, Ryan said, you arrived just in time. I want you to be the first to know Emily has accepted the position of Director of Strategic Planning. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but Ryan continued, and her first executive decision will be to delegate some of the operational work so she can focus on long-term strategies. Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Finally, Emily, you deserve this more than anyone I know. But I haven't even said I accepted, Emily protested. You don't need to, Ryan said, standing up, because I know you understand that this company needs you in this position, and I know you won't abandon a project halfway. It was a subtle but effective manipulation. Ryan knew Emily well enough to understand that appealing to her sense of responsibility would work better than arguments about personal merit. All right, Emily sighed, but with a few conditions. I'm listening. First, my first hire will be an assistant to help with the operational side. Second, I want full autonomy to structure my team. Third, if at any point you think I'm receiving special treatment for non-professional reasons, you can demote me back to analyst. Ryan nodded. I agree to everything, but I have one condition too. What? You stop working until 2 in the morning. That's non-negotiable. Emily laughed, this time with genuine joy. Deal. As Emily signed the contract, Sarah observed the interaction between them with a maternal smile. At 54, she had seen many professional relationships in the company, but there was something different about the dynamic between Ryan and Emily, a complicity that went beyond hierarchy or business strategy. Ryan, Sarah said, I received an interesting call this morning. From Thompson. No, from Consolidated Mining, that Canadian company we lost last year. They want to reschedule a meeting. It seems they've heard rumors about our new strategic direction and are interested in resuming talks. Ryan exchanged a meaningful glance with Emily. Interesting. What do you think? Emily consulted her notes. It makes sense. If we can close with Consolidated, we prove to the market we are viable on our own. And more importantly, we showed Thompson that we are not a declining company desperately seeking a merger. Schedule the meeting, Ryan decided, for next week. I've already scheduled it, smiled Sarah, for Thursday at 2 p.m. Ryan laughed. I'm going to have to get used to the fact that I now have 2 strategists working 5 steps ahead of me. 3, corrected Emily, touching her belly. This one is already influencing my analytical decisions. Must be genetic inheritance for strategy. The light-hearted joke created an awkward silence as everyone realized the implication of what Emily had said. Talking about genetic inheritance in front of Ryan, who clearly had feelings for her, brought to light the reality of the baby's biological father. "Emily," Ryan said gently, "about the baby's father. Do you have news from him?" Emily's face tightened slightly. "Daniel showed up last week. He said he wants to talk about responsibilities. We set a meeting for this Saturday." Sarah sensed the tension in the air and discreetly began organizing the scattered papers on the table. "And do you want him to be part of the baby's life?" Ryan asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "I want my child to know his biological father, if that's what's best for him," Emily replied carefully. "But I won't accept a weekend dad or someone who shows up and disappears when it's convenient." Ryan nodded, though Emily could see the tension in his jaw. "If you need anything, legal support, or even just someone to talk to—" "Thank you," Emily said, briefly touching his hand. "But I need to handle this on my own first." The intimate moment was interrupted by Ryan's secretary entering the room with an urgent expression. "Mr. Anderson, sorry to interrupt, but there's an important call on line 1. It's Richard Thompson, and he said he has an answer to our proposal." The air in the room changed instantly. 3 weeks of intensive work were about to be tested. "Put him through," Ryan said, pointing to the conference phone. Emily and Sarah positioned themselves where they could hear the conversation, their faces tense with anticipation. Ryan answered. "Richard, how are you?" Thompson's voice came through clearly on the speakerphone. "Ryan, I spoke with my partners about your interesting counter-proposal. And what's your decision?" "We've decided to accept." The shock was visible on the faces of the 3 people in the room. It was the last response they expected. "Accept our buyout offer?" Ryan asked, trying to maintain his composure. "Exactly. $120 million for Thompson Brazil. When can we sign the papers?" Ryan, Emily, and Sarah exchanged looks of pure panic. The bluff had been called, and now they needed to figure out how to buy a company with money they didn't have. The presidential office had turned into a crisis bunker. At 7 p.m. that Thursday, with New York City gearing up for another night of chaotic traffic, Ryan paced back and forth, while Emily, now visibly 5.5 months pregnant, sat in the leather armchair with her legs elevated on an improvised footrest. Sarah had been on the phone for 2 hours, trying to gather information about Thompson Brazil's actual financial situation through her contacts in the market. "I got something," Sarah said, hanging up the phone and moving closer to the table where dozens of documents were spread out. "Thompson Brazil is facing a federal audit, suspected money laundering through inflated contracts with mining companies." Ryan stopped pacing. "That explains why they accepted our crazy proposal." "They need to offload their Brazilian assets quickly," Sarah continued, "and our offer, even though it was a bluff, provides a legal and relatively profitable exit." Emily massaged her temples, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. "Ryan, we need to be honest about our situation. We don't have $120 million, not even close." "How much do we have?" he asked, throwing himself into the presidential chair. Emily consulted the spreadsheets on her laptop. "Considering the current cash flow, emergency reserves, and bank credit limit, at most 15 million liquid. And that would completely compromise our operations for the next 2 years." "What if we could find investors?" "For that, we would need a solid business plan, realistic projections, and at least 3 months of time for presentations," Emily replied. "We have until Monday." The silence in the room was thick when the phone rang. Ryan answered, and his expression immediately closed off. "Yes, I understand. No, we are not cancelling the meeting. Monday at 10 a.m. is confirmed." He hung up and turned to the 2 women. "Richard wants to bring his legal team and 2 representatives from the bank that will mediate the transaction." "Crap," Emily murmured, momentarily forgetting her formality. To sum up, Ryan said, trying to maintain a professional tone, we have 3 days to come up with $120 million or invent a way out that doesn't completely destroy us. That's when Sarah, who had remained quiet for the past few minutes, straightened in her chair with an expression Ryan had learned to recognize as dangerous. What if we didn't need the $120 million? She said slowly. Emily and Ryan stared at her. What do you mean? They asked in unison. Sarah opened her bag and pulled out a flash drive different from the one she had shown weeks before. Remember I said I started documenting everything when I suspected their intentions? Well, that includes some very interesting conversations I had with Thompson's accountant. What kind of conversations? Emily asked, her analytical mind already processing the possibilities. Conversations about how they were moving money between the Brazilian and American branches to avoid taxes. Conversations about fictitious contracts with consulting firms that exist only on paper. Conversations about, Sarah paused dramatically, how they were planning to use the purchase of Brightech to clean some of the questionable money. Ryan felt a chill. Sarah, are you saying they wanted to use us as a front for money laundering? Exactly. The plan was to buy Brightech, transfer the dirty contracts here, then shut down our operations citing cultural incompatibility. Money would be clean, and they would have eliminated a competitor in the process. Emily leaned forward, ignoring the discomfort in her back. And do you have evidence of this? Sarah waved the USB drive. Audio recordings, screenshots of conversations on WhatsApp, copies of internal documents that the accountant showed me. She paused. He was so drunk at one of the meetings that he told me that Thompson America was being investigated by the FBI too. Why didn't you tell us this before? Asked Ryan. Because I wasn't sure how to use the information without compromising myself even more. But now... Sarah smiled with a mischievousness they had never seen in her. Now they are trying to force us into a deal that could destroy us. It's time to use all the weapons. Emily began to connect the dots at the speed of a computer processing data. Ryan, if they are being investigated for money laundering, they can't just disappear with $120 million without raising even more suspicion. Go on. They need the transaction to look legitimate. They need us as much as we thought we needed them. Emily turned to Sarah. What exactly is their legal situation? Has the audit turned into a criminal investigation yet? Sarah consulted her notes. It's still in the audit phase, but my contact at the Federal Reserve said there have been strange movements in their accounts for at least 18 months. It's just a matter of time before the FBI gets involved. Ryan began to envision a strategy. What if, instead of buying Thompson, we offered a merger on completely different terms? What do you mean? Asked Emily. Think about it. They need to exit the U.S. quickly and cleanly. We need to grow and eliminate a competitor. What if we created a new company, a joint venture where we take over all their legitimate contracts and they just disappear? Emily nodded slowly. A reverse merger. They transfer the clean assets to the new company, which would be controlled by us. And in return, they receive a minority stake that they can gradually sell off. And the dirty assets stay with the original company, which they close down citing global restructuring, Sarah added. Brilliant, said Ryan, but we still need capital to structure this. Emily smiled, the first genuine smile in days. Actually, we don't need to. If it's a merger, it's not a purchase. We only need operational capital, not acquisition capital. And how much would that be? Considering we would take over their contracts and key employees, maybe $20 to $25 million for the first 6 months of integrated operations. Ryan did the mental math. That's feasible, especially if we can land 3 or 4 new contracts to justify the growth. Speaking of which, said Sarah, checking her phone, Consolidated Mining confirmed the meeting for tomorrow, and I have 2 more companies interested in presentations next week. Emily leaned back in her chair, finally feeling they had a viable plan. Ryan, this could really work, but it needs to be presented in a way that makes it seem like their idea. How do we do that? Leave that to me, said Sarah with a smile that mixed satisfaction and a thirst for revenge. I know Richard Thompson well enough to know exactly how to plant this idea in his head. The desk phone rang. It was Ryan's secretary informing him that there was an unexpected visitor downstairs, Daniel Smith, Emily's ex-boyfriend, saying he urgently needed to talk to her. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Emily turned, pale, her hands instinctively protecting her belly. What an interesting coincidence, murmured Ryan, his voice laden with a tension he was trying to hide. He shouldn't be here, said Emily, clearly shaken. Our conversation is scheduled for Saturday in a neutral location. Do you want me to send him away? Offered Ryan. Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to accept the protection, but she knew she needed to face Daniel eventually. No, better to resolve this now. She stood up, adjusting her clothes to disguise her belly. You can continue working on the plan. I'll handle this and come back. Emily, said Ryan, as she was almost at the door, if you need anything at all, just call. She nodded, grateful for the support, before disappearing down the hallway toward the elevators. Sarah watched the expression on Ryan's face as he looked out the window, clearly worried. Ryan, she said softly, can I make an unsolicited suggestion? About Thompson? About Emily? Ryan turned to her, his defenses immediately rising. Sarah, that girl is in love with you. Anyone with eyes can see that. But she is afraid that you are with her out of pity or because you feel you need to save her. Sarah stepped closer to him. And you are in love with her, but you are afraid to pressure a pregnant woman in a vulnerable situation. Ryan did not deny it. And what's your suggestion? Stop treating her like she's fragile. Emily is one of the strongest women I know. If you want to be with her, be honest about it. But be honest about wanting her, not about wanting to take care of her. Before Ryan could respond, the phone rang again. This time it was Emily, her voice tense. Ryan, I need you down. I need... Here, now. The call was abruptly cut off. Ryan and Sarah ran to the elevators, both knowing that the conversation about feelings would have to wait. Downstairs, a much more immediate crisis awaited them. The lobby of the Skyline Tower was a spacious area of white marble and ornamental plants, designed to impress visitors with its understated elegance. At 8:15 p.m. on a Thursday, the traffic had significantly decreased, with only the night security guard, the receptionist on duty, and a few people waiting for elevators. It was in this setting that Ryan and Sarah found Emily standing near the leather sofas, visibly tense, while a man in his 30s gestured animatedly in her direction. Daniel Smith had the kind of looks that Emily used to find irresistible: tousled curly hair, stubble suggesting a bohemian air, and casual yet expensive clothing, dark jeans, a designer t-shirt and a jacket, the leather that probably cost more than the monthly salary of many employees at Apex Business Consulting, was the perfect stereotype of the freelance journalist who considered himself a rebellious intellectual. You can't just ignore me, Emily, he's my son too. Daniel's voice echoed through the lobby, attracting curious glances. Daniel, lower your voice, Emily whispered through clenched teeth, clearly embarrassed by the public scene. And you lost the right to talk about our son when you disappeared for 3 months without any explanation. It was then that Daniel noticed Ryan and Sarah approaching. His eyes narrowed as he assessed Ryan, the impeccable suit, the confident posture, the way Emily unconsciously positioned herself closer to him. So, That's the reason, Daniel said with a bitter smile. The rich boss who convinced you that you don't need the real father of your child. Don't talk like that, Emily replied, her voice laden with a rage that Ryan had rarely seen in her. Ryan has nothing to do with our issues. Of course not, Daniel laughed sarcastically. What a coincidence that a junior analyst is working until 8 at night with the CEO of the company. What a dedicated professional relationship you two have. Ryan stepped forward, his patience reaching its limit. Mr. Smith, I suggest you lower your voice and treat Emily with the respect she deserves. Oh, now the knight in shining armor is going to give me lessons on how to treat my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, Emily corrected firmly. And Ryan is not a knight at all. He's my boss and my friend, and he's here because I asked him to come. Daniel studied the group with the eyes of a journalist trained to detect lies. Friend, he repeated slowly. Emily, you've always been terrible at hiding your emotions. You're in love with him. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily felt her blood rush to her face, and Ryan stood still as a statue. Daniel, Emily said, her voice low but firm, that's none of your business. It is my business when it affects my son, he raised his voice again. Do you think I'm going to let my child be raised by a corporate playboy who is just taking advantage of your situation? That was the last straw for Ryan. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Emily, do you want to talk to him? Because if you do, you can use one of the meeting rooms upstairs. If not, I can ask security to escort him out. Emily looked between the two men, feeling the weight of a decision that would define much more than just that night. Daniel, you have 10 minutes. Let's talk upstairs, but with Ryan present. If we're going to discuss the future of the baby, I want it to be with complete transparency. Emily, you don't have to, Ryan started. I do, she interrupted, because Daniel is right about one thing. He is the biological father, and that needs to be clarified once and for all. The elevator ascended in tense silence. Sarah had stayed in the lobby, claiming she needed to make some calls, but Ryan suspected she wanted to give privacy to the upcoming conversation. In the meeting room on the 29th floor, Emily positioned herself on one side of the oval table while Ryan and Daniel took chairs on opposite sides. The dynamic was clear, Emily in charge, two men waiting for her decisions. Daniel, Emily began, I'll be direct. When I found out I was pregnant, you disappeared. Literally, changed your number, blocked my social media, and left a message saying you weren't ready for responsibilities. Right? Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Emily, I was in panic. Finding out I was going to be a father when we hadn't even talked about living together. I'm not interested in your excuses. She cut in. What matters is what you want now. I want to be part of my child's life. On what terms? Daniel hesitated, clearly not expecting such a direct approach. What do you mean? Emily opened her bag and pulled out a notepad, assuming the analytical posture that Ryan knew well. Financial terms. Do you want to take on child support, medical expenses, education? Practical terms. Do you want supervised visits, alternate weekends, holidays? Legal terms. Do you want your name on the birth certificate? Do you want joint custody? The list of objective questions clearly caught Daniel off guard. I hadn't thought of all those details. Well, you should have thought about it, Emily said, because that's what being a father means. It's not just showing up when it's convenient or when you feel jealous because someone else is taking your place. Ryan watched the scene fascinated. Emily was conducting the conversation like a business negotiation, removing the emotionality and focusing on practical facts. Emily, Daniel said, his voice losing the previous aggression, I know I acted poorly. I know I disappointed you, but when I found out you were working closely with him, he pointed at Ryan, I realized I could completely lose the chance to know my child. Daniel, you can know your child, but you need to understand that I will no longer accept unstable relationships or people who come and go from our lives when it's convenient. Emily paused. And you need to understand that my love life is no longer your concern. But it is the baby's concern, Daniel insisted. Emily, you barely know this guy. He's your boss, has money, power. How do you know you're not being manipulated? It was Ryan who answered, his voice calm but firm. Daniel, I can answer that. Emily is not being manipulated because she is one of the smartest and most independent people I know. She challenges me professionally every day, questions me when she disagrees, and has made all the decisions about our friendship on her own. Friendship, Daniel repeated skeptically. Yes, friendship, Ryan said. Because unlike you, I understand that Emily doesn't need to be saved or protected. She needs to be respected and supported. Emily observed the two men, clearly seeing the contrast between their approaches. Daniel saw her as someone vulnerable who needed protection from bad decisions. Ryan saw her as an equal who... Emily deserved support for her own choices. Daniel, she finally said, I'm going to give you a chance, but with clear rules. Do you want to be part of the baby's life? Then you will participate for real. Medical appointments, preparing the nursery, childbirth classes, the boring and responsible part of pregnancy, not just showing up after the baby is born to play dad. And him? Daniel pointed to Ryan. What will his role be? Emily looked directly at Ryan, and in that moment they both understood that everything was about to change. Ryan, she said, he's my friend, my professional mentor, and, she paused, gathering courage, someone I have very deep feelings for. If he wants, he will be the father figure my child truly needs. The silence in the room was absolute. Daniel turned pale. Ryan felt his heart race, and Emily held her breath waiting for their reactions. Emily, Ryan said softly, are you sure about what you're saying? Absolutely sure, she replied, looking directly into his eyes. But only if you want this too. Ryan stood up, walked over to where Emily was sitting, and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. In his, Emily, I've been in love with you for weeks, not because of the situation, not out of pity, not from a protective instinct, but for you. For the brilliant, brave, and independent woman you are. If you accept me, I want to be part of both your lives, forever. Daniel watched the declaration with a mix of anger and resignation. And me? Where do I fit into this romantic story? Emily turned to him, still holding Ryan's hands. You get to be the biological father who chooses to be present and responsible, or the one who chooses to keep running from responsibilities. The decision is yours. Daniel was silent for a long moment, processing the new reality. Finally, he stood up. I need to think about this, he said. But Emily, if you are sure this is what you want, I will respect it, and I will try to be the father our child deserves. He headed for the door, pausing before leaving. Ryan, he said without turning around, if you hurt her or the baby, you'll have to answer to me. Understood, Ryan replied, but that won't happen. When they were alone, Emily and Ryan remained silent. For a few minutes, the weight of the declaration still settling between them. Ryan, Emily finally said, are you sure you want to get involved with a pregnant woman, with all the drama that entails? He smiled, the first genuine smile of the night. Emily, I want to be involved with you, the baby, the drama, the complications. It's all part of the package, and I don't want any other package. Emily felt tears in her eyes, pregnancy hormones mixed with pure emotional relief. Then come here, she said, because I need a hug. And then we need to go back, upstairs, and figure out how to buy a company with money we don't have. Ryan laughed, carefully wrapping his arms around her without putting pressure on her belly. "About that, I think we found a solution while you were down here revolutionizing your personal life." "Oh, really? What?" "Sarah had a brilliant idea, but I'll let her tell you herself." As they went back up to the 32nd floor together, Emily realized that in a single night she had resolved two of the biggest questions in her life: her future with Ryan and the situation with Daniel. Now all that was left was to save the company and ensure everyone had a job on Monday. No pressure at all. 6 months later, on a sunny October morning heralding the arrival of spring in New York, Emily woke up in her new home in Brooklyn with the first real contractions of her pregnancy. Ryan was beside her, checking emails on his phone when she grabbed his arm hard enough to make him drop the device. "I think today's the day," she said, taking a deep breath as a wave of pain coursed through her 8.5-month belly. The house they had bought together 3 months earlier was a renovated townhouse with a backyard garden, 3 bedrooms, and an office they shared to work from home on weekends. The baby's room was impeccably prepared: light wood furniture, walls painted a soft yellow, and a nursing chair where Emily had spent many nights reading reports while feeling their daughter's movements. "Sophia is as impatient as her mother," Ryan said, already getting up to grab the bag they had prepared weeks earlier. "She wants to be born early so she doesn't miss the closing meeting with the Japanese." Emily laughed through the contractions. The Brightech Thompson International, the name of the new company resulting from the reverse merger they had orchestrated, was about to close the biggest contract in the company's history. A 5-year consulting project with Mitsubishi Mining worth $200 million. The contract was set to be signed the following Monday, and Emily had insisted she wanted to be present, even if she had to bring her newborn daughter to the meeting. "Call Sarah," Emily said, heading to the bathroom. "She needs to know that I might not be able to review the final documents today." "Emily, you're in labor. Sarah can handle the documents," Ryan said, dialing the hospital number on his phone. "Besides, everyone can handle it. You're not indispensable for every detail of the company." "I am," Emily retorted, brushing her teeth between contractions, "at least until I officially sign my maternity leave." The reverse merger had been an even bigger success than they had imagined. Instead of being bought by Thompson, Brightech had absorbed all the legitimate contracts of the American company, retained key employees, and completely eliminated predatory competition. Robert Thompson had accepted a 30% stake in the new company in exchange for the assets, but he had moved to the Cayman Islands 2 weeks after the federal police opened a formal investigation into money laundering. Sarah, who had become the director of international operations, had proven to be a strategist. Helena was always the best when it came to dealing with foreign clients. David, her husband, was officially cured and had returned to teaching history, now as a guest lecturer in an MBA course on business ethics in times of crisis, an irony he deeply appreciated. Helena's phone rang as they headed to the car. It was Daniel. "Helena, I heard you're going to the hospital. Can they come too?" Over the past 6 months, Daniel had proven to be a pleasant surprise. After the confrontation at the office, he had religiously kept all his commitments. He accompanied Helena to medical appointments, attended childbirth preparation classes, and even bought a crib for her apartment. More importantly, he had completely respected her relationship with Ryan. "Of course," Helena replied as Ryan helped her into the car. "But you know Ryan will be with me in the room, right?" "I know, I just want to be at the hospital when my daughter is born." The word "my" still stung. A bit for Ryan, but he had learned to accept that Sophia would have 2 fathers who would love her in different ways. The important thing was that she would be raised with love, stability, and solid values. Mount Sinai Hospital was bustling with activity when they arrived. Helena was immediately directed to the pre-labor room, where the medical team confirmed that the baby had decided to arrive 2 weeks earlier than expected. "First child," explained the obstetrician, Dr. Emily Johnson, who had been following Helena for 8 months. "They tend to be eager to meet the world." Ryan held Helena's hand during the first hours of contractions, amazed by her strength. Even in labor, Helena maintained the analytical clarity he admired, asking technical questions to the medical team and insisting on knowing exactly what was happening at every moment. "Ryan," she said during a pause between contractions, "there's something I need to tell you before Sophia is born." "What is it?" "I love you," she said simply. "Not just because you were amazing with me during the pregnancy, or because you decided to be the father of my daughter. I love you because you are the most honest man. I know because you make me laugh even when I'm stressed, and because—" she paused for another contraction, "because you see me as I am, not as someone who needs protection." Ryan kissed her forehead. "I love you too, and I can't wait to officially start our family." Daniel appeared in the waiting room at 3 p.m., carrying flowers and a stuffed bear bigger than he was. To everyone's surprise, he had brought a companion, Marina, a preschool teacher he had met in a single-parent preparation course. "I thought you guys should meet Marina," he said to Ryan during a break in the hallway. "We've been dating for 2 months, and she's going to be part of Sophia's life too." Ryan extended his hand to Marina, a friendly woman with curly hair and a genuine smile. "Nice to meet you. Daniel talks a lot about you in the childbirth classes." The conversation was interrupted by a scream from Helena coming from the room. Labor had dramatically accelerated. Sophia Helena Silva Anderson was born at 5:23 p.m. on a Tuesday, weighing 6.2 pounds and measuring 18.5 inches. She had dark hair like her mother and eyes that seemed to change color depending on the light. When they placed her in Helena's arms for the first time, she stopped crying immediately and fixed her gaze on her mother's face with an intensity that impressed the entire medical team. "She's perfect," Ryan whispered, gently touching the tiny fingers that instinctively closed around his thumb. Daniel entered the room an hour later, accompanied by Marina, and was visibly moved to see his daughter for the first time. "She has your eyes," he said to Helena, "but the nose is definitely mine." "And the stubbornness will be from the whole family," Helena laughed, still exhausted but radiant. The most touching moment came when Sarah arrived at the hospital, accompanied by David and half a dozen employees from the company carrying balloons and gifts. She had closed the office early, declaring family emergency, so everyone could meet the newest member of the Brightech family. "She was born on a lucky day," Sarah said, holding Sophia with the experience of someone who had raised 3 children of her own. "The Japanese called an hour ago. They want to expedite the contract signing for Friday. They said having a daughter born in the company is a sign of prosperity. In their culture." Helena laughed, shaking her head. "Sophia hasn't even been born yet, and she's already influencing international business." "Speaking of business," David said, "I brought a surprise for you." He pulled out from his folder an article from the New York Times. Brightech becomes a case study at Harvard on business ethics. The article told the story of the reverse merger, describing how a Brazilian company had turned a hostile takeover attempt into a model for sustainable growth. "You've become an international reference," David smiled. "My former students are calling me to see if they can do internships at the company." Ryan looked at Helena, who was breastfeeding Sophia for the first time, and felt a completeness he had never experienced. The company was thriving, they had a family they had consciously chosen, and they had proven that it was possible to do business while maintaining human values. "Ryan," Helena said, offering Sophia for him to hold, "do you want to give your daughter her first bottle?" The word "your" resonated in the room with a profound meaning. Daniel nodded encouragingly, understanding that fatherhood was not about biology, but about presence and unconditional love. As Ryan fed Sophia, Helena looked around the room filled with people who had become family. Sarah and David, who had turned mistakes into loyalty. Daniel and Marina, who represented second chances. The colleagues who were more than just employees. "You know," Helena said to Ryan, "when I was pregnant and alone, I thought my life had completely derailed. Now I realize I was just switching to better tracks." "Much better," Ryan agreed, kissing Sophie's forehead, "and with a much prettier view." Outside the hospital window, New York stretched out in all its chaotic and vibrant complexity. But inside room 304 of the maternity ward, 3 people had created their own universe of love, trust, and infinite possibilities. Sophie opened her eyes for the second time since she was born, as if she wanted to take a look at the world waiting for her. Emily and Ryan smiled, knowing they had created not just a successful business, but something far more valuable, a true family built on conscious choices and genuine love. 2 weeks later, Sophie was present at the signing of the contract with Toyota, peacefully sleeping in Ryan's arms, while Emily led the meeting as if she hadn't just given birth. The Japanese executives were impressed by what they called the perfect harmony between family life and professional success. And when they asked what the secret to Brightech's success was, Emily looked at Ryan holding Sophie and replied, "We understand that the best businesses are those that build people, not just profits."